Yeah, great. As always, with these sort of progressive journeys that we
Mhm.
take in SEO, it's worthwhile doing a little bit of a recap as part of this as well, so we don't just forget last CEO school session. We roll
Mhm.
from that into this. Okay, so today's session is called Pitching with Confidence. A lot of pitching advice is well established. Much of it is repetitive of previous original work. And I think what we're going to focus on today is less of the things we already know about pitching and more about the content and quality of what goes on. And to be honest, about how to tailor it in advance as best we can to the audience we're speaking to. And that really means tailoring things a little bit, because as we all know, just as in the clothing world, in the business world, one size doesn't fit all. Today, we're going to recap on the sales mindset work we did in the previous session. And then today, we're going to spend a little bit of time together on elevator pitch design and structure. We've got some already asked questions that we're going to also put into the mix today. And then finally, look about how do I leave a conversation with a potential buyer to try and get closing momentum or a hook into the conversation that will lead to a closing conversation. What we talked about last time was this need to understand customer needs, not just for a generally product design and customer communication, but it also matters in your pitch discussions, as we'll see later on. Customer needs, you might call them problems, are what people pay to have solved. And therefore, getting the right understanding of the right needs is a fundamental part in everything else that follows in the sales process. I don't know whether you have given any more thought to your customers' needs and whether or not you've got a really good understanding of those. Have you taken that forward at all in your own mind?
There's some kind of further research, just chatting quite informally to a couple of small businesses. And
Yes.
a couple of days ago, I had a kind of insight of the particular type of business, not so much in terms of like sector that I'm trying to help, but more at where they're at in their business growth. And I
Hmm.
realized that I don't necessarily want to work with somebody that's just started, because I think that my offering is probably best suited to somebody that their business is growing quite a bit, or they're moving from a stage of they don't have enough capacity to just be working on their own anymore. They need to start hiring, or they need to start freelancing with people.
Yeah.
I also can realize that I think it's kind of what you're talking about, like mindset, not particularly for sales, but I think it's important that the type of thing that I want to offer in terms of making a business future proof and everything. I think an important part of the mindset for that is that the founder values their time more than they did when they first started.
Yeah.
So they're deliberately trying to take themselves out of the business more, so they've got more free time to think about strategy and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and once you get inside the needs of a customer like that and start to
Mm,
understand really what are their trigger points, it's
mhm,
much more easy to communicate with them, isn't it? And I think you'll find as we talk this morning about sales pitch, that same kind of core point runs through a lot of good selling. And I'll talk about selling as a word later on. So prioritize value creation. That's another key point in all this. It's the old nugget, isn't it? Going back into the 1950s, 60s, and 70s of saying, what's in it for me? The commercial win, if you like, that the other party to the conversation is going to get out of it. Do you find it easy to articulate that, Jane, or do you think, oh, I'm not sure what the value is or how to quantify it, or I'm uncomfortable even talking about it?
I wouldn't say I'm brilliant at it, I don't think, but I think I have gotten a bit better.
Mm.
There was a wee bit of an insight actually that I got maybe a couple of years back, because when I was helping my brother, actually, his business.
Mm.
His business is in insolvency.
Ah, yes.
Uh, so he was trying to think about marketing for it all.
Mm.
It was a kind of valuable insight with kind of goes to like value creation or trying to express the value, but for marketing in particular.
Mm.
Um, I realised that I kind of said to him, it sounds a wee bit harsh, but to be honest, nobody cares what you do. No, they don't want to hear about all the fabulous details about how to liquidize a business or all
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Actually, that's very funny. It's liquidate, not liquidize, although it
Is
might
it?
feel a bit like
Right, sorry.
that.
It's too early in the morning to be talking about these things.
Yeah. Liquidating is turning it into cash. Liquidizing it is turning it into mush.
And in the blender, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Nobody really cares about how they go about it. Like, what they care about is they're able to sleep again at night,
Mm.
or they can make sure that they can put food on the table, or
Yeah.
make sure that their kids are going to be all right, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said to him, like, the approach for the marketing should be more not so much about talking about the product or the service itself, but it's more, I'm glad I took that product because now I can sleep at night and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. The next point is really this kind of move to action from theory. I speak regularly to entrepreneurs in inspiration space who almost hesitate about talking to customers, not because they're worried about their business or even that they're particularly personally uncomfortable in engaging in communication. It's just a kind of confidence journey, actually, and that people worry at first about speaking to potential client targets because they just have something they think isn't quite right or isn't quite ready or isn't quite perfect. And I don't know whether you feel as though your business, its product and its marketing materials are all beautifully polished and would give a Formula One team cause to blush, or whether you're actually still in the developmental stage and therefore a bit hesitant about going out to the ugly real world.
Like, for the marketing things, I'm okay with it not being perfect. I'm a lot better than I was a few years ago, put it that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
perfectionism still gets at me sometimes,
Mm.
where I may be a bit, footering around with something longer than I should, when I know I should really just put things out there and see how people respond. I'm still guilty of that sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And far having structure to your approach,
Mm.
taking them from where they are to where you want them to be, which is buying. I talked about some of the human elements like getting to know, trust, and then buy. That's the kind of human emotional undercurrent to it. But of course, there is a progression through the sales funnel. And we'll talk briefly about some of those going on. But this idea that there is a beginning, middle, and end to a sales process. And although we don't flag it clumsily to customers, it is true that they're all going to be going down this route one way or another. Is that something that you're comfortable with in your business? You're quite logical about it now.
Yeah. mm, When it comes to getting near the part with the sale, I think that's where I stumble a bit. Probably because
Yeah.
of confidence and everything. It doesn't help really because I'm quite introverted. I find it a lot easier to help people, say for inspiration space. It's easy for me to create things and ideas for that, but doing it on my own account, I'm like, oh, I'm scared.
Yeah. I do know what you mean. I, by nature, am a relationship builder rather than some sort of, shall we say, red in tooth and claw hunter salesman who just wants to go in the building and after 30 seconds, if it doesn't feel right, can't be bothered to stay anymore. I understand what you're saying, and I do think the information exchange leading to trust is much more natural for a more reserved person than an extrovert person. But actually, customers really like it. Customers really like free information exchange, knowledge exchange, leading to trust building. And I think actually for nearly all people, that kind of journey to take you through the sales process is much more comfortable and much more trust building more quickly. Ironically, not being some sort of mad extrovert who just wants to go barreling in and metaphorically spearing bison and dragging them off to the butchers, that is more of a natural behavior that people would like to receive. So it could be that inadvertently your natural behavior is more likely to be successful than the alternative, quote unquote, classic hunter salesperson.
Yeah, I think you're right with that, and that maybe even quite recently I realized that people resonate more when I'm being more authentic or more genuine rather than feeling like I have to pretend I'm extroverted or something like that.
I often say to people, I'm at a large corporate client today, and we're talking about the new business sales team here. One or two who wouldn't look out of place in a circus, they're so extroverted, but others aren't. And what I think is a nice touch is to lead customers through the sales process as a byproduct of conversation and knowledge exchange. In other words, it's a journey and it's not clunky. It doesn't feel like somebody's being forced like a round peg through a square hole. It actually is it's a mutually developmental conversation that both parties are exploring, understanding, moving forward together. And I think that's also a much less scary place for people, particularly sole business experts, to inhabit, because that just be yourself is actually the greatest asset. Yeah. So that's probably referencing back to your experience. Actually, when you're just being yourself and talking about the problem and exchanging knowledge and aligning it to the client's problems, then that's where the magic happens, frankly. Okay. We talked about, quickly, I'll just go through these because I don't want to waste time on what we spent last time, the exact detail of everything we talked about, but understanding target-rich customer environments and a good customer profile is very helpful because it means you don't waste your time fishing in the wrong pond. Understanding and expressing what your business does, its value, in a way that the customer needs it. Express that from the customer's perspective. Have collateral and proof that the problem solving methodology that you've got works and that you can demonstrate other people have used it and it worked for them. And then finally, speed to action matters a lot during a sales process. It builds confidence. It also underpins and resonates with professional behavior, which people who are looking to buy a service really value, and it helps to build trust. So if we quickly ping on, this sales funnel we all know very well. It's just that it's a journey, and that whether either accidentally or deliberately, people tumble through that funnel in all cases to get to the end goal. Okay. So today's main discussion is about working in today's session, but also to a degree by iterative evolution on how to express your own business and what problem it solves. Now, there are a lot of unfortunate courses about elevator pitching that really try to make this very formulaic, and one often sees these sorts of courses emerging from, and no intention to offend Liana here, American research. Now, unfortunately, cultures around the world are different, and those cultures do matter. Now, the elevator pitch has to resonate with the cultural tropes of the person you're speaking to or the organization you're speaking to. Just as we said earlier on, there's a need to tailor things to a client. I think probably the most important thing about this section is not that you need 100 different elevator pitches. It's just that the nuance with which it is expressed makes a big difference to how it is received. So the formulaic things about what are the elements and what main components should I have are absolutely true, actually. There are things that if you don't have them in there, they're going to look really odd. But you have to be free and relaxed about making them work for the person on the other side of the table. And I don't know whether that just sounds common sense to you, Jane, but it's what we in Inspiration Space believe to be true anyway.
It's interesting what you're saying with like elevator pitches. I haven't actually went through the process of crafting one for the current business, but I did do one for when I was developing the kind of Scottish gin business idea.
Yeah.
And that was very formulated. The advice was given, like, you have our hook and then you do this and then you do that. And it was pretty much fixed. That was for like a 1 minute pitch. Yeah, that's a good point. You have to think about cultural context and everything.
Yeah, you do. And I don't wish to trash that work you did for that company, because actually the good thing about that work is it gives clarity and makes you challenge your thinking and makes you express yourself clearly. All we know is, particularly service selling is a relationship-based exchange, and therefore the elevator pitch has to have that nuance to it in that case. Okay, so what sort of things, Jane, do you reckon the person on the other side of the table is looking for? Not in detail, because it varies by, but what sort of one or two things do you imagine, or from your experience, do you think the other person's going to be hoping to hear about?
In a pitch, I guess, they want to know kind of, I don't know how to articulate it. They want to know that they understand the thing, the problem, but I'm not sure if that means like you just saying what you think the problem is, or if you go into more depth. I guess it really depends on who you're speaking to. Maybe if you've had a prior conversation or not, or
Yeah.
I'd imagine something that I find quite useful when, say, I'm creating a deck or something, is the sections where people say like, why us and why now. So I probably want to include that as well. But that's for my own benefit, just because I think that they are useful. But then again, that really depends on who you're speaking to.
Yeah, and I think pitching is often divided into the kind of don't know the person stage and the do know the person stage. They're two very different levels of engagement and come with two different knowledge sets. A lot of pitching training is about, you meet the person in the metaphorical elevator, you've got 35 seconds, and what are you going to blurt out? Or perhaps that's not the right word, but it's essentially what you're going to try and transmit. Now, that isn't really a listening or a knowledge-based exchange at all. That is purely a bit of marketing activity, actually, saying clearly what your business is about. There is a place for that, and it can be, if the hook is right, it can be enough to start you on a relationship building channel and getting them into the sales funnel. But what people, I would say, look for on the buy side of the pitching exchange and experience is relevance to them and relevance to their problems. This is normally it's full of busy people who haven't got time to be faffing about with somebody who's interested in a problem that they've got no need to hear about or whatever. Clarity about what you do matters. And assuming this is one where you're either side of the do or don't know them yet, clarity does matter. And therefore, the clear thinking from our side of the table will allow us to say, this is what I do, and this is what businesses need. Now, if you've done a bit of research, but you don't know them, the chances are you'll already have nuanced it a bit. But if you just are literally passing them cold at the metaphorical water cooler, then that's just going to be a starting part to the conversation. And they'll say, well, actually, I'm not really sure that's relevant to me. This is what we do. Say, that's interesting. What buyers look for when being pitched to is some relevance to them. And we ought to have been able to tailor or nuance that during that very brief conversation to try and get the hook lodged in the mouth of the metaphorical catch there. Okay? Okay. What sort of things would naturally occur to you to include in a pitch? And forget for the moment whether we know or don't know. What sort of key elements do you reckon might, from your experience, prove valuable?
Trying to think. I'm going to go back to my old elevator pitch in my head.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing that they encourage you to do is have some kind of interesting hook. For me, it was just asking the question, like, who can help you with the... So it's all about Scottish gin. So it was like, who can help you with finding the perfect gin for you? And then just identifying the problem, which was in that pitch, it was, nobody can help because nobody has enough expertise or across the sector. Like, everyone is happy with their own gin because they have their own individual bottles to sell, and they're all biased, so clearly biased towards their own products, but nobody's giving you individual guidance if you're buying something as a gift for somebody else, or if you want to find out more, if you like particular things, whether it's a navy strength gin, or you like floral gins, or you want to buy one from a particular area of Scotland or anything like that. And I think that's one of the things that was helpful was explaining your uniqueness, your unique ability to help. So for us, we were like the only people that were specialising in Scottish gin as a whole. We wanted to be seen as an authority in that nation. We'd already done that by doing free articles in the Scotsman, and I was speaking to Leanna the other day about this. We had our little Scottish gin quiz that helped you with like picking the right bottle, and so we were the only people trusted by Visit Scotland, and a couple of other places for the Scottish tourism and things like that.
So I think you talk about several very important elements there. One that is really the precursor to anything that might happen as the relationship develops are what gets the conversation started. An elevator pitch isn't going to lead you to a sale in one easy leap. And even effective pitching won't do that. It's going to start the process. And I think a lot of people imagine that the right pitch converts immediately into selling the combine harvester. It ain't like that. actually the key point to include in a pitch is, or points are, 2 or 3 elements that one of which has a good chance of penetrating the thick rhino skin of the other party and creates that hook you talked about. Because all we're trying to do with the elevator pitch is not do a comprehensive summary by any means of our business. We're trying to create interest that leads to conversation, that leads to discussion, that leads to developmental sales activity. It's the very first moment of spark where we're striking 2 flints together and hoping the kindling will catch light. I think something about the problem you believe the customer may or may not have, something about the product or service that we have that we believe will address that, and something about confirming with that person that you are onto something. You can ask that either by obvious and clear questioning or by gauging their reaction. It's more conversational to say, is that something that you're interested in, or do you have a related problem? And you can sometimes lead it from that. But it's okay. We talked a little bit in our reheat about how we feel personally about pitching and selling. And I'm not going to spend hours on this because I just believe that they're taught as humans by experience how to talk to each other. We are highly effective communicators. We're just not all communicating in the same way. And therefore, the most important thing to overcome our self-consciousness is to know we're okay in our own skin. We are fine. How we look, how we speak, how we deport ourselves, so long as they underpin the professional or service or characteristics we want to transmit, they're fine. There's probably very little use in crawling out of a one-person tent and going straight into a business meeting with senior executives at IBM, but it might just work if you're going to do something with Cotswold clothing or something like that. Fundamentally, being what we are isn't a hindrance. It's a massive advantage because we're comfortable there. And therefore, overcoming self-consciousness is about fundamentally accepting we're just okay as we are. And if we are relaxed, then pitching and selling is a conversational activity rather than some complicated skill we have to go to Harvard Business School to properly master. You will have had some successes, but most people who are involved in commercial work have infinitely more failures than successes when they're out talking to customers. Have you ever had a negative experience, Jane? And what perhaps did you take from it?
Yes, yeah, actually, when I did my pitch, I should maybe go back a little bit in that I feel like I have some valuable skills from my old training as a musician.
Yeah.
That's helped a lot in terms of, I know I'm an introverted person, but I also know how to prepare and almost feel like I'm going on a stage. And for this, the little thing I wanted to share, it was actually going on a stage. It was a 400-person conference called The Elevator up in Aberdeen, and it was a pitching competition. So I had my 2-minute pitch, and it was very strict. Like if you went over the 2 minutes at all, then they just completely cut you off. So I managed to do my pitch, and it was like 1 minute 58. So I was chuffed. I managed to do it. It was a bit nerve-wracking because we went up on the stage and everything, but I didn't succeed with that pitch. I didn't win. Somebody else got the £1,000. Boo! But but it was a valuable experience. I think that's a good point in the for your pitch. It's valuable to I guess be accepting that it's not going to work every time, but is also valuable because every time that you do the pitch, you're filtering through it in your own mind, but you're also
Yeah,
filtering the type of business that you want to work with.
yeah. And I think a negative sales experience can be it can be a mixture of reasons that have led to it being negative. As you say, wrong sort of business, actually, the problem they've got I can't help with, or I didn't express my problem solving ability as well as I wanted to.
Mm.
Essentially, the way they can inform a better approach is to be the CEO and look at it dispassionately. And rather than saying, I failed, you say, well, that process there, that little episode didn't work. And what do I think I could have done differently or should do differently in order to make the next one more high potential or the conversion rate better? So really, negative sales experiences should be accepted as part of the process. So it's not failure, it's just part of the process. However, let's take what positives we can from it by understanding and learning and improving, just to your point. You took from that. Actually, I really kept that on time and I really was unusual in that respect. And
I did
okay,
get
Leah.
some feedback actually. I remember now I think with the lady that was judging, I think she was from, I want to say Dubai or something.
Mm.
And she said in her feedback that there was quite a lot of my pitch. She just couldn't understand me because of my accent. So I was like, I might have to bear that in mind. Because of my music training, I can turn into Queen's English if I need to. Sing
Very
English
convincing.
art song. So okay,
Yeah.
that might actually come in handy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you'll then be struggling with the relaxed and conversational element there. So, yeah. Good. Okay, Lee, this is an interesting one. You don't know often who else the client might be talking to. You don't know the nuances of what they're doing or the nuances of the individual. But there are things we can do in advance and during an interaction with a potential customer that can help differentiate us. We know that a lot of pitch and initial interaction training is aimed about creating a kind of burp of verbiage that comes out. And I've experienced many people attempting to go through that method in front of me, not through our courses, but in real business life. And it's very obvious. And the best strategy to differentiate ourselves from the vast amount of competition is not working so hard on clarity of content. I think a lot of people can do that well, although it's something we have to hold ourselves accountable to. It's our delivery, because clarity hopelessly delivered is difficult to win with. But clarity that's delivered conversationally and in a relaxed and trust building way really is different. And so even in the world we live in now, so many people fail at that. So I would say one strategy is clarity, to have that underlying thought behind what you're doing. But the second one is the interactive way you behave and use that human sense that you've got, Jane, to adapt what you were going to say in slightly or change the order of things or whatever based on as you glean knowledge in your conversation with the person, how to get my pitch attuned to the needs and problems without it feeling clunky, like somebody's dragging heavy furniture around and it's screeching across the floor. Okay, the journey with exchanging information can be tortuous. Some people are just dull. It could be the person on the other side of the table is dull and bogs the whole thing down. because of their nature, or it could accidentally be that we're not having a great day and we're being a bit overly complex, overly detailed, and actually coming across as lethargic, either intellectually or literally. So the best way to do this is to have a good pace and energy to our conversation when we're having it. And although the words quickly and effectively are used here, I'd say pace and clarity sell ideas and value. So we need to have energy in our delivery, and we need to have clarity in it as well. And that's really what will allow us to accidentally to the person start to hook into their attention and concentration because they're engaged. Things are moving at a reasonable pace, not gobbledygook, but they are being moved intellectually as well as emotionally by how we're behaving. So one of the things that we took from the session last week, Jane, is the need to be able to demonstrate success. Trust is built on a number of things, and people won't buy from you or any other company without trusting either the product or the service and the person. So what real life scenarios do, even in the pitching environment, whether casually dropped into the conversation or explained in more detail, is they provide proof of effectiveness. And I'm sure you've personally had occasion where you've been able to do that. It might be interesting to hear, perhaps if you've got one that's in your mind, say, oh yeah, I did quote this or did do that, and it made a difference to the person.
Yeah, I think for me, when I've tried to, I guess, express what effectiveness. I guess each person is unique. I like relying on the numbers to tell the story for me.
Yeah.
So it could be like for the kind of things that I'm doing, like say for example, if people are wanting to try things like Facebook ads, like I would say to them, in a funny way, like don't trust me, look at the numbers and see the numbers don't lie. If I could get the cost per click down for them, or the click-through rate is also an important statistic that people look at. And
yeah
I like another part of that is I have to kind of get the balance right depending on who I'm speaking to, because I could happily speak about this kind of nerdy stuff all day and all night. I appreciate not everyone gets excited about cost per click advertising. So I have to be careful that I don't bore somebody.
Yeah, the interesting thing about success stories is, and whether that's, as you say, a data table that proves that if you do A, then B happens, and a percentage of B turn to C, and that's what you're looking for. The secret is understanding whether or not the success is aligned to the customers that you're demonstrating is aligned to the customer's problem. And I suspect that the most adaptive way of being able to demonstrate success is to have a little Rolodex of examples that you verbally have to hand. So you could say, okay, for that type of scenario, I can show a numerical data solution. So that I can have a picture of the company's logo and talk to actually what I did there or whatever. Because in a way, that proof of effectiveness, that success story that you're retelling, is almost the most pivotal thing that will move somebody from knowing and perhaps even liking you to starting to trust you, because you can. So therefore, they're not incidental things in a pitching type situation, because they can make a great deal of difference to whether somebody just having a conversation with you to starting to move it on into the starting to trust you scenario. Closing the deal is a real hoot, isn't it? When do we do this? tell me a little bit about an example where you did close something and how far that was into the lifespan of the discussion you'd had with the customer.
Mm, Usually, like, if I'm speaking to somebody, I'll
Mhm.
say to them like, "Oh, can we follow up with a discovery call of some kind?" And I have made mistakes before. I've done a pitch and thought it went quite well, and realized after I'd finished, I didn't ask for anything at the end.
Mm.
I didn't even ask to follow up or to meet or have a coffee or I'm like, oh dear, I need to make sure that I do that now.
Yeah. And so the tips and strategies for closing are all about uh, the next step in the relationship. Now, closing the deal, this slide sounds as though we're actually at quite an advanced stage. So let's go with this slide for a moment. But let's assume that we're in the point where the customers learn to trust you, to trust your product, and has a problem that you will be able to address, and that you've clearly expressed yourself up till that point, and there's no misalignment. So you know that there's a good need and solution proposition on the table.
Mm.
So the tips and strategies for closing are probably best expressed by, again, some fairly simple advice that was given many decades ago, actually, about understanding, have I got clarity on, are there any buying hurdles I haven't yet excavated? I often think that in a polite way, saying, is there anything now that you still wish to understand before you would buy from me? Or is there anything else I need to explain or to clear up that's stopping you buying from me? And politely put, if we're in Britain, perhaps more bluntly put in other cultures, that single approach to closing has more effect than any other I've ever come across. And I can't resist it when somebody runs that routine past me, because it forces you to think, well, rather than just saying, oh, that was fun, it forces you to raise your objections as the buyer. And for us as the selling party to this, that is pure gold, because you're almost getting to the point where you're saying, well, there's really no reason now, is there, why we don't move to buying, because I can address that or deal with that. So I think the best tip and or strategy is to excavate objections rather than leave the room with them unknown, point one. And then to your equally valid point, what's the next step? So excavate the objections, deal with them, and then agree the next step. And that's really what leads to some brilliant closing, in my experience. I don't know whether that resonates with you, Jane.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that thing you said, I can't remember how you said it exactly, but I think it's genius. It actually feels really brave to me to do that and to just be explicit about, you're saying in a very polite way you want the sale, and then you're also saying, like, tell me why you might have any objections. Those are both things that you're kind of asking when you say that. Feel very courageous to me, but it's also making things very clear, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, customers will vary in their reaction to such a request. But on the whole, I find they answer professionally.
Mm.
And that's all you want, because going back to one of our earlier slides, learning from failure or why it didn't work really matters. And if you ask that closing question, you really get the truth, in my experience. And that's really helpful, because if you don't ask that question as part of your out in the conversation, then you are going to always think answers, but maybe you don't. And so therefore, it's not so much courageous, it's actually good business. Because if you ask that question, you'll get really good intelligence from the customer or potential customer, and that can really help you hone your next interaction with more clarity and effectiveness in mind. Okay, so some background things. It's really important to be yourself, to be calm, and basically don't leap a great white shark when the person's only in the getting to know or getting to like you stage or your product. You've got to go through a process that leads to closing, and trying to close at an inappropriate moment will always lead to awkward and ineffective failure, which means you've wasted your time, which is silly. So closing at the right time, it matters. And but that's very easy to understand when you're in an uncomfortable situation. Okay, Liana, if you kick on. Listening for closing signals. Is the client starting to nod, and are they almost leaning forward and asking, tell me the price, tell me whatever? That's again very important to try and understand by looking and listening, not just projecting at people. Look at the person on the other side of the table, Jane, and work out when they've moved into the trust and buy zone, so you can behave in a sort of similar way. Okay, this is a sort of buying signal type of form of words. They're almost taking as read some of what you've said and said, oh, how can I adapt it? What would it be if I did more of this or less of that? And almost you can feel somebody standing in the shop now looking at the shelf saying, I've got £100 in the bank. I was only coming in to spend 20 on this, but actually for 25 I could get that, or 15 I could get this. They're thinking about converting their resources into your services and products. So when you start to hear this, you're in the warm zone for closing, and look out for them. If they're talking about money, that is a big green flag. How much does it cost? What does it want? Essentially, what we end up with is look out, Jane, for those things that they're almost like a telltale, aren't they? That the person's not trying to acquire knowledge so much now, but try and understand the commercials of the situation. And that is one of the strongest buying signals of all. Those last two slides were trying to address that. So a pitch is a face-to-face conversation or a virtual conversation where you're trying to move from a low base of knowledge or understanding on both parts to an engaged conversation. And much of what I've said today is not about rocket science. It's about just reflecting that being natural, being relaxed, being ourselves, whatever that may be, but listening to the customer and reacting to the customer is a really strong way to improve the effectiveness of what you're doing. I don't know if you found that useful.
It's been really useful. Thanks, Nigel. It's really made me think about parts of my pitch that I think I just need to clarify it in my head a little bit more before I start talking to people, and it was a good reminder.
Yeah, I think don't be too worried, to go back to our earlier sort of preamble remarks. Trying to refine your pitch through conversation is a low conflict way of ending up with a great pitch. So why not have a conversation with somebody and work out afterwards, be the CEO to yourself and say, okay, that bit didn't work, that felt better. Okay, I will craft around doing that better the next time, and say it's going to take me 3 or 4 goes to go from where I am to being 100% better. And I'll never ever end up with the perfect pitch that will always work all the time. I'm always going to have to adapt it a little bit because everybody on the other side is a little bit different.
And I have one quick question, which is budget. When you're selling services, at the very end, how do you bring in that, how much have you got to spend without being crass?
I think that if we go back to this point about, is there anything stopping you from buying? I'll keep it in that clumsy way just to make the conversation easier now. One of those things, they might say, don't know, really, no, not much. You might say, so for example, do you have the budget to do this? So I would ask it conversationally as the answer, Liana, rather than as a blunt leading question, because that to most people in the culture in Western Europe, that's a rude question. And because money's awkward in Britain, isn't it? We don't like talking about it at all. So we have to sidle up to it, don't we, as a conversational thing. And therefore, there might be cultural differences, I accept that. But I would say, put it after the what's stopping you buying. If they don't mention money, why not mention it then? Because then they might front that up and say, well, actually, I think you're going to cost me about 10,000 and I've only got 3.5 to spend or something like that. So that would be how I would approach that one.
Thank you very much. If you're watching the replay, check the notes below. We've got some follow-on resources that you can use. A lot of it created by members and mentors within the community. Thank you, Nigel, for CEO School this month. Next month, we're talking about measuring our impact. And in your forums, you will have a go at pulling your pitches together and selling to one another.
Have a great few weeks, and I look forward to seeing you at the next get together in May.